So to really turn this into a game, of course, we need to have some point. We do have a point now that we have this challenging environment where we have to shoot the rocks, but we don't have any sort of purpose. How do we ever win or lose the game? I guess if we just shoot rocks forever, we win. And if we get hit by a rock, then we lose. But we actually have to make it a little bit more interesting than that. So let's talk about creating a point system and how we can actually use attributes to kind of keep track of how many rocks that we shoot. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is go into the attributes, and we're going to click the plus icon to create a brand new attribute. And this attribute is going to be a real attribute. And again, don't worry about what all of these mean, but for real, just think of it as a whole number, like 1, 2, 8, 10, nothing with a decimal. So we'll have real, and we'll click choose. And then we're going to rename this. Instead of new attribute, we're going to rename this score, like that. So our score is set to 0. If we go back to our actors, I can create a new actor, and I'll just rename this actor score as well. And we can just drag that here in the top right portion of our screen. So if I double click on this score actor, we can get it to display some text. So if we scroll down to display text and drag that into our score actor, right now if we preview this, it's going to display the text hello world, and we can see that it's white. We don't want that. So let's just put in a number right now, and let's switch the color to something dark and preview that, and you can see now we have the number 10 in there. But we don't want the actor to just display the text that we have in this box. We want it to display the text that is that score attribute that we just created. So again, we need to click on this expression button here. So I'll click on that. And what we want to do is we want to click on this first pull down, click on game, and then this is where our attributes that we create are going to be located. Okay, so let me do that one more time. I'm going to click on the expression tab and click on the first pull down and click on game, and then click on the score attribute that we just created and double click on it. So you can see it's inputted it right there into our expression editor. I'm going to hit check mark. So now the text that's being displayed is that attribute, the game attribute score that we created. So if we hit preview, it should say 0. And why does it say 0? Well, if we back up to where that attribute is, so again, I'll click on the attribute tab here. Well, we created this attribute, we renamed it score, and by default, it's set to 0. If I were to just type in, like, let's say 100, and then preview, we have this actor to display that attribute, which is now 100. So whatever this attribute is what this actor is going to display as text. So of course, we want our score to be set to 0. So now, how do we actually change this score? Well, as you can imagine, we want when this rock is destroyed or is blown up by one of our bullets, we want it to change the score. So let's jump into our rock actor. And let's create a new rule. And the new rule is going to say this. When this actor overlaps and collides with the actor shot, we want to change something. Well, what did we just create? We created an attribute. So that's why we want to grab the change attribute behavior and drag that here. So again, when the rock overlaps and collides with the shot, we want to change an attribute. And which attribute do we want to change? Well, if we click on these dots here, we can go back to the game, double click on score. So now we want to change this attribute, and what do we want to change it to? So we'll click on the expression editor. We're going to click on the first pull down, back to game, double click on score. So okay, you're saying you want to change the attribute score to the attribute score? That doesn't make any sense. Well, what we want to add here is a plus and then a number. So you can do plus and any number you can think of. So if you want your score to move up in increments of 1, then you would just do +1. But I think it's more fun if we do maybe plus 10. And then we can hit the check mark. And now, if we hit preview, when I shoot a rock, you can see our score is going up. And every time this bullet overlaps and collides with one of these rocks, we now have a score which is going up by 10. So now we're up to 150 points. So this is really important, so I want to redo this one more time just so you can follow along. I'm going to create a new rule, and this rule is going to say when the rock overlaps and collides with the bullet, which we have named shot here, we want to change something. We want to change the attribute that we created. So we want to find that attribute by clicking on these dots, game, the score attribute, double click on it, and we want to change it to something. So again, we're going to click on this first pull down, game, double click on score, and we don't want to just change it to itself. We want to change it to itself plus a number. And in this case, I'll just type in 100 this time. We'll click that check mark, and that way every time we shoot a rock, we're going to get 100 points added to our score. So pretty simple stuff. Now, what's really amazing about this is we've now set up a scoring system here inside of our game, but if you paid attention to how we set that up, we can use that same knowledge to pretty much do anything we want. So let's say that you had some small rocks that were worth 10 points, and then you had some bigger rocks that were worth 100 points. I bet you could figure out how to challenge yourself to create a game now that had multiple scoring systems, that had rocks that were worth 10 points and rocks that were worth more than that. So take a moment to kind of pause this video and think about it. How would you create a scoring system that had some rocks that were worth one value and some rocks that were worth another value? But instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is use the same system to actually subtract. So now we've added, but we can actually subtract from that attribute as well. So we're going to stick with this single attribute here called score that we're adding to every time we shoot a rock. But we can actually subtract from this as well. So for instance, let's say that we want a game where, of course, shooting rocks are really good and it's adding to our score, but we also want a game that promotes the accuracy. So every time you shoot a bullet, you're actually subtracting from your score. So then that way you can't just go around like I did, just randomly firing off in all directions. You actually want to be somewhat accurate while you're shooting. So to do this, we're going to go into our ship, and you notice that our ship has this rule that we created, which is the spacebar rule, right? So every time we hit the spacebar, what happens? We're creating this shot actor to be spawned. But we can also use this same rule to kind of piggyback a new behavior in, which again is this change attribute. So I'm just going to grab the change attribute and drag that up into the spacebar. So we can do the exact same thing that we did for the rock. We can grab that attribute, so we'll click on game, double click on score, click on the expression, the first pull down, game, double click on score, and instead of doing a plus, we're going to do a minus 10. So watch what happens even before I hit a rock. The minute I hit spacebar, we get a negative value. See all the negative values that are happening in my score now? Now we're actually subtracting from the score. So now we've not only learned how to add to the score, but we can subtract from the score. So that's kind of awesome because now I can actually shoot at these rocks, but I'm promoting the player to try and be as accurate as possible because every time I shoot, I'm taking away from my score. And if I just go around doing this, I'll definitely get a higher score because our rocks are worth 100. But you'll notice if you play the game with a little bit of accuracy, then of course you're going to be a lot higher in your score because you're not just randomly shooting in every which direction. So now what you're going to want to do at this point is really kind of tweak the gameplay a little bit. Are the rocks coming too fast? Are there too many of them? You're going to want to kind of think about how you can make this game a little less challenging on earlier levels, and then when we create other levels, we'll make it a lot more challenging as well. So now let's take a moment to quickly adjust the score actor that we've dragged into our scene. If I hit preview, we have this beautiful scene with all this nice graphics, and then we have this ugly white box here that we want to adjust. So if we double click on the score actor, you're going to notice that you have a graphics pull down here, and you have a blending mode. And depending on the color of your actor, you're going to have different blend options that are going to work for you. So if I switch this to opaque and I hit preview, you're going to see that we still get our actor, but you need to find the one that works for the color of your actor. So for instance, if we switch it to screen and then finally multiply, you'll see that we've now knocked out our actor. Now the only thing is, now that we've done that, we don't see the actual text itself. So we want to change the color of the text, and if we switch this back to white and preview this, you can see that we have our text showing up, and now because we've used multiply, we've actually knocked out the white background of the actor. So we can have a nice clean score up here. And of course, if you don't like that color, you can switch to something that matches the game a little bit more. So I'm just going to push this over kind of to like an aqua green, which I think matches our bullet a little bit more. And then you have a few different options of text that you can choose from, or fonts. And of course, you can change the font size. So if I want a bigger score, I can push this up or type in a value like 60. And your actor hasn't disappeared, we just have that multiplied, so you're going to have to just kind of click in the area to find it. And then we can adjust this and move it here to the top. And then click preview. And you can see we get a very different score. Let's adjust that a little bit. It's a little too far to the right, so push that over. You can see if you just shoot randomly and even miss rocks, you can get a negative score as well. So now we have a kind of a much better looking scoreboard up in the right hand side of our screen. So now what we want to set up, again, that we have a challenge here with our enemies, which would be our rocks, and we have to shoot them and we have to gain score. Again, we still haven't really created a game here. We have no purpose. We're just randomly shooting forever. And of course, when we die, and there's no more. So we need to find a way to either win this game or lose this game. And that's what we'll do next.